What if I told you that every single day, while you are walking down the street, sitting in your office, or even lying in your bed at night, invisible entities are watching you? Not ghosts, not demons, something far older and far more terrifying. Something that has been controlling humanity for thousands of years without our knowledge. Something the ancient Gnostics called the Archons. In 1945, a discovery was made in Egypt that would shake the foundations of everything we thought we knew about reality. Near the town of Nag Hammadi, a farmer stumbled upon 13 leather-bound codices buried in a sealed jar. These were not ordinary books. These were forbidden texts, hidden away nearly 2,000 years ago by people who knew too much, people who were being hunted for their knowledge. Among these texts was one particularly disturbing manuscript called The Hypostasis of the Archons, or The Reality of the Rulers. This ancient document described in chilling detail a group of non-human entities that exist just beyond the edge of human perception. According to these texts, these beings feed on human consciousness, manipulate our thoughts and emotions, and have constructed what the Gnostics called a prison planet to keep humanity enslaved. But here is what makes your blood run cold. These ancient texts also contain something else, a technique, a specific method that would allow human beings to actually see these entities with their physical eyes. The question is not whether these beings exist. The question is whether you are ready to see them. Because once you learn this technique, once you glimpse what has been hiding in plain sight all along, you cannot unsee it. Your entire understanding of reality will shatter like glass. Every institution you trusted, every authority figure you believed in, every spiritual teaching you were given, suddenly reveals itself as part of an elaborate control system designed to keep you blind, compliant, and most importantly, harvestable. The ancient Gnostics discovered this truth. The early Christian church spent centuries trying to erase it. Governments and secret societies have worked tirelessly to keep it buried. But the technique survived. Passed down in whispers from master to student, hidden in obscure texts, coded in mystical symbols. And today you are going to learn it. Before you can see them, you need to understand what they are. The word Archon comes from ancient Greek, meaning ruler or authority. But these are not rulers in any earthly sense. According to the Nag Hammadi texts, particularly the hypostasis of the Archons discovered in 1945, these entities exist in a realm that overlaps with our physical reality, but remains just beyond normal human perception. The texts describe two distinct types of Archons. The first type is described as having an embryonic or fetal appearance, humanoid in shape, but incomplete, as if they never fully developed. The Gnostic scholar John Lamlash has noted the disturbing similarity between these ancient descriptions and modern reports of so-called grey aliens, those beings with large heads, small bodies, and expressionless black eyes that have dominated UFO abduction accounts for decades. Coincidence? The Gnostics would say absolutely not. The second type of Archon is described in even more disturbing terms. According to the Reality of the Rulers text from the Nag Hammadi library, these beings possess androgynous bodies with faces like beasts. The leader of the Archons, called Yaldabaoth or Sakla, which means the fool, is described as having the face of a lion and the body of a serpent. This entity is also referred to as the Demiurge, a false god who created the material world as a prison for human souls. Think about that for a moment. The ancient Gnostics believed that the physical universe itself was not created by the true God, but by a deluded, arrogant entity who wanted to be worshipped as God. And to maintain this cosmic deception, this false creator deployed an army of Archons, supernatural enforcers whose sole purpose was to keep human beings trapped in cycles of suffering, ignorance, and spiritual amnesia. But how do they do this? How do invisible entities control billions of human beings? The answer lies in what the Gnostics called the counterfeit spirit. According to these ancient texts, Each Archon attaches itself to a human being and mimics that person's thoughts and emotions. It whispers suggestions that feel like your own thoughts. It generates emotional reactions that seem to come from within you. It creates the very voice in your head that narrates your experience of reality. This is not metaphorical. The Gnostics believed that the majority of thoughts flowing through human minds do not originate from within, but are implanted by archonic influence. Every negative thought loop, every fear, every addiction, every obsessive pattern that keeps you distracted from spiritual awakening, all of it carefully cultivated by these parasitic entities. They feed on what researcher Robert Monroe called loosh, a specific type of emotional energy produced by human suffering, fear, anxiety, and low vibrational states. We are, in the most literal sense, an energy farm for non-human intelligence. The Bible itself contains veiled references to this reality. Ephesians 6:12 states, "Our contest is not against flesh and blood, rather the authorities of the world and the spiritual hosts of wickedness." The Gnostic text, Reality of the Rulers, directly quotes this passage, making it clear that the authorities being referenced are the Archons. These are the beings that Christ came to earth to overcome, not through worship or belief, but through gnosis, direct spiritual knowledge that breaks the spell of archonic deception. Modern science has inadvertently confirmed aspects of this ancient worldview. Neuroscientists have discovered that up to 95% of our thoughts are unconscious and repetitive. We are running programs installed by sources we cannot identify. Psychologists speak of the shadow self and intrusive thoughts without acknowledging what ancient mystics understood, that many of these mental phenomena may not be internally generated at all, but represent external interference masquerading as the self. The Archons maintain their control through a sophisticated system that operates on multiple levels. They manipulate human perception, creating what the Gnostics called counterfeit realities, illusions that seem real but are designed to distract and mislead. They incite passions, creating emotional turbulence that prevents clear thinking and spiritual discernment. They teach idolatry, convincing humans to worship false gods, false ideologies, false identities, anything to prevent them from discovering their true divine nature. And they enforce forgetfulness, clouding the soul's memory of its origin and purpose. This is why you cannot remember where you came from before birth. This is why spiritual truths feel simultaneously familiar and forbidden. This is why every major institution on earth, religious, political, educational, and media, seems designed to keep you in a state of distraction and spiritual sleep. The system is not broken. The system is working exactly as the Archons designed it to work. Now we arrive at the moment you have been waiting for, the technique itself. But before I reveal it, you must understand something crucial. This is not a parlor trick. This is not entertainment. Once you begin to perceive what has always been there, your relationship with reality fundamentally changes. You cannot unsee what you see. You cannot unknow what you know. The Gnostics considered this knowledge so dangerous that they buried their texts in the Egyptian desert for 2,000 years. Are you certain you want to proceed? The technique is rooted in an understanding that the Archons exist at a specific frequency of reality that is adjacent to normal waking consciousness. They are not in another dimension entirely, but in a bandwidth of perception that most humans have been conditioned to ignore. Think of it like a radio. Your normal consciousness is tuned to one frequency, the frequency of material reality, jobs, bills, social obligations, all the noise that keeps you locked in survival mode. But there are other frequencies, other channels broadcasting simultaneously. The Archons operate on one of these adjacent frequencies. To see them, you must learn to shift your perceptual bandwidth without fully leaving normal waking consciousness. This is not an astral projection. This is not meditation with your eyes closed. This is physical sight, operating at an expanded spectrum, and it requires a specific neurological state that bypasses the filtering mechanisms your brain has been trained to employ. Here is the technique, broken down step by step. Step 1. Peripheral vision activation. The human eye has two types of photoreceptor cells: cones concentrated in the center of your vision that perceive color and detail, and rods distributed around the periphery that detect motion and operate in low light. What most people do not realize is that rod cells are far more sensitive to subtle energetic phenomena. Ancient mystics understood this. Modern paranormal investigators have discovered that entities often appear first in peripheral vision, where conscious control is weakest. Begin by softening your gaze. Do not focus intently on any single point. Instead, allow your vision to become diffused, as if you are looking at everything and nothing simultaneously. This is similar to the technique used in magic eye puzzles, where relaxing your focus allows hidden three-dimensional images to emerge. In this state, peripheral vision becomes dominant, and the filtering mechanisms of your conscious mind begin to relax. Step 2. The defocused stare. Once your peripheral vision is activated, practice what the mystics called the 1,000-yard stare. This is a gaze that looks through objects rather than at them. Soldiers returning from war sometimes display this involuntarily. They have seen things that exist between layers of reality. Trauma tears the veil, but you can induce this state intentionally. Pick a spot on a wall, approximately 6 to 10 feet away. Focus on that spot initially, then gradually relax your eyes until the spot becomes blurry. You are not trying to see the wall. You are trying to see the space between you and the wall. Step 3. Twilight hours and low light conditions. The Archons are most visible during transitional states, dawn and dusk, when the barrier between material and immaterial reality is thinnest. Dim lighting is essential because bright light forces your cones to dominate, sharpening material reality and obscuring the subtle layers. Work in a room with low ambient light, just enough to see shapes and shadows, but not enough to read comfortably. Candlelight is ideal because it flickers, creating natural fluctuations that reveal what remains hidden in stable illumination. Step 4. The flicker phenomenon. This is the key insight that ancient practitioners discovered. Archonic entities do not appear as solid, stable forms. They flicker, they shimmer. They appear for a fraction of a second and then vanish, like a digital glitch in reality. This is because they exist at a vibrational frequency slightly out of phase with dense matter. When your perception shifts into the correct bandwidth, you will see them as dark shapes, moving shadows, translucent forms that defy physics, appearing and disappearing at the edge of your visual field. Many people have already seen them without realizing it. That shadow figure you glimpsed in your peripheral vision, but found nothing when you turned to look. That fleeting sense of a presence in an empty room, that feeling of being watched when you are alone. These are not hallucinations. These are brief moments when your perception is accidentally tuned into the archonic frequency. The technique simply teaches you to sustain that perception deliberately. Step 5. Stillness and breath control. Movement disrupts the perceptual state. Your body must be completely still. Sit in a comfortable position where you can remain motionless for at least 20 minutes. Control your breath. Slow, deep inhalations and exhalations. 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds. 4 seconds out, hold for 4 seconds. This rhythmic breathing pattern alters your brainwave state, shifting you from beta waves, normal waking consciousness, into alpha waves, a relaxed but alert state where the veil between worlds becomes translucent. Step 6. Silencing the internal dialogue. This is perhaps the most difficult part. The constant mental chatter in your head is not entirely your own. Much of it is archonic interference designed to keep you distracted. To see them, you must silence this noise. Do not try to force thoughts away. Instead, become the observer of your thoughts. Watch them arise and dissolve without engaging. In the gaps between thoughts, perception expands. This is where they become visible. Step 7. The first sighting. When it happens, And it will happen if you practice consistently. Do not react with fear. Fear is the Archonic weapon. It lowers your frequency and gives them power. Instead, observe with detachment. Note what you see. Dark humanoid shapes moving with unnatural fluidity. Translucent geometric forms hovering in mid-air. Shadows that move independently of any light source. Document these observations without judgment. You are a scientist observing a previously uncharted species. Important warning. Once you begin seeing them regularly, they become aware that you can see them. This changes the dynamic. Some practitioners report increased archonic activity, more intrusive thoughts, more frequent attacks. This is why the ancient Gnostics emphasized the importance of gnosis, not just seeing them, but understanding their nature and developing spiritual immunity. Knowledge is not enough. You must cultivate the inner divine spark that the Archons cannot touch, the uncorrupted essence of consciousness that predates the material prison they constructed. Now that you understand how to see them, you need to understand why this knowledge has been suppressed for millennia. The answer is simple and terrifying. If enough human beings wake up to the Archonic control system, the system collapses. The Archons require human ignorance to maintain power. They are parasites. Without hosts who consent to their manipulation, they cannot survive in this realm. Every major institution on Earth has been infiltrated or constructed to maintain the Archonic agenda. Religion teaches you to worship external gods and await salvation from outside yourself, keeping you in a state of spiritual dependency. The true divine spark, the fragment of uncorrupted consciousness that the Gnostics called the pneuma, exists within you. But religion redirects your attention outward, toward intermediaries, priests, prophets, holy books, anything to prevent direct gnosis. Education conditions you to accept material reality as the only reality. Science, at least mainstream materialist science, denies the existence of consciousness as anything more than brain activity. You are taught that you are a biological machine, a temporary accident of chemistry with no deeper purpose. This is Archonic propaganda designed to make you believe you are powerless, meaningless, and insignificant. A population that believes it has no soul is easy to control. Government and politics create endless conflict, division, and fear. Left versus right, nation versus nation, race versus race, gender versus gender. An endless parade of engineered conflicts designed to harvest loosh. Every war, every riot, every act of terrorism generates massive quantities of fear-based emotional energy that the Archons feed upon. The more traumatized and divided humanity becomes, the more nourishment they extract. Entertainment and media keep you in a state of constant distraction. Television, movies, social media, video games, all carefully designed dopamine delivery systems that prevent introspection, spiritual inquiry, or meaningful human connection. The average person spends more time staring at screens than interacting with physical reality. This is not accidental. A distracted population does not ask dangerous questions. A distracted population does not look up and see what hovers just beyond their peripheral vision. The medical and pharmaceutical industries keep you in a state of chemical sedation. Antidepressants, anxiety medications, sleeping pills, all designed to numb your perception and prevent the kind of heightened awareness required to perceive the Archonic presence. Traditional shamanic cultures used entheogens, plant medicines, to tear down the veil and perceive hidden realities. Modern medicine does the opposite. It reinforces the veil and pathologizes anyone who claims to see beyond it. Even the modern New Age movement, with all its talk of love and light and positive thinking, serves the Archonic agenda. It teaches spiritual bypassing, the idea that you can simply ignore darkness and negativity and ascend into blissful higher dimensions. This is another trap. The Archons want you to ignore them. They want you to pretend they do not exist. As long as you refuse to acknowledge the predator remains invisible and untouchable. True gnosis requires confrontation, not avoidance. The Gnostics understood something that has been lost in modern spirituality. You cannot love your way out of a predatory system. You cannot meditate your way out of a prison when the guards are feeding on your spiritual energy. You must first see the prison. You must recognize the guards. Only then can you develop the strategic intelligence required for liberation. This is why the early Christian church, once it was co-opted by Roman imperial power, systematically destroyed Gnostic communities. The Gnostics were not heretics because they worshipped the wrong god. They were heretics because they taught direct spiritual knowledge that bypassed institutional authority. They taught that Christ was not a sacrificial lamb who paid for your sins, but a spiritual revolutionary who showed you how to recognize and overcome the archonic rulers. This was an existential threat to any power structure based on fear, obedience, and spiritual intermediaries. The Nag Hammadi texts were buried around 350 CE, precisely when the newly Christianized Roman Empire was hunting down and exterminating Gnostic teachers. Someone, knowing the texts would be destroyed, sealed them in a jar and hid them in the Egyptian desert, hoping a future generation would find them. That future generation is you. But suppression did not end in ancient times. Throughout history, any group or individual who stumbled upon this knowledge faced persecution. The Cathars of medieval France, who revived Gnostic teachings, were massacred in one of the bloodiest genocides in European history. The Knights Templar, who allegedly discovered secret knowledge in Jerusalem, were arrested, tortured, and executed. Countless mystics, alchemists, and esoteric practitioners throughout the centuries were burned as witches, heretics, or lunatics. In modern times, the suppression is more subtle but equally effective. Instead of burning books, the system buries them in obscurity. Instead of executing teachers, it marginalizes them as conspiracy theorists or mentally unstable. Instead of prohibiting the knowledge, it drowns it in an ocean of disinformation so overwhelming that truth becomes indistinguishable from fiction. Consider this. If you tell someone you saw a ghost, they might be intrigued. If you tell someone you saw a demon, they might be concerned. But if you tell someone you can see invisible entities that feed on human consciousness and control our reality, they will question your sanity. This is social conditioning at its finest. The most important truth is the one you are trained to reject without investigation. Seeing them is only the beginning. Once you perceive the archonic presence, the real work begins. Perception without strategy is dangerous. You have unveiled the predator, but that does not mean you have escaped its reach. In fact, becoming aware of them often intensifies their attacks because you are no longer an unconscious food source. You have become a threat. The first principle of archonic immunity is this: they cannot control what they cannot manipulate emotionally. Every archonic technique relies on triggering emotional reactions: fear, anger, lust, jealousy, shame, guilt. These emotional states lower your vibrational frequency and make you permeable to their influence. When you remain emotionally neutral, observing without reacting, you become invisible to their primary mode of attack. This does not mean suppressing emotions. Suppression is another form of control. It means developing what the Buddhists call equanimity, the ability to experience emotions without being controlled by them. You feel fear, but you do not become fearful. You notice anger arising, but you do not identify with it. This creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space you are free. The second principle is cultivating the inner divine spark. The Gnostics believed that within every human being exists a fragment of the true God, the uncorrupted consciousness that predates the material universe. This spark, called the pneuma, is untouchable by the Archons. They can manipulate your body, your emotions, your thoughts, but they cannot touch the deepest essence of your being. The spiritual practice is learning to identify with that essence, rather than with the temporary constructs of personality and ego. This is accomplished through direct inner experience, through gnosis. Meditation is helpful, but only if it leads to direct knowing, not just relaxation or stress relief. Contemplation of the question, "What am I?" pursued relentlessly beyond all mental answers, dissolves the false self and reveals the indestructible witness beneath. This is the state the Archons fear most, because a human being anchored in the divine spark cannot be harvested, controlled, or deceived. The third principle is understanding and rejecting the reincarnation trap. According to Gnostic cosmology, the Archons have constructed a system to recycle souls back into material incarnation again and again. When you die, you encounter a tunnel of light and beings who present themselves as angels, guides, or deceased loved ones. They tell you that you need to return to Earth to learn lessons, balance karma, or fulfill contracts. This is a lie. It is the archonic reincarnation machinery designed to wipe your memory and trap you in another cycle of suffering and energy extraction. The Gnostic texts teach that at the moment of death you must reject these false guides. Do not follow the light. Do not accept their narratives. Instead, assert your divine sovereignty. Remember who you truly are, a fragment of the infinite consciousness that was never born and can never die. Demand passage beyond the archonic realms to the Paroma, the fullness of divine being beyond duality, beyond matter, beyond the reach of the false rulers. This may sound like science fiction, but consider the striking parallels with modern near-death experience research. Many NDEs report encountering beings of light who review their lives and encourage them to return. Some researchers, like Dr. Michael Newton, interpreted this as evidence of a benevolent afterlife system, but others, examining the same data through a Gnostic lens, see a control mechanism designed to maintain the soul recycling operation. The fourth principle is strategic action in the material world. Knowledge without application is sterile. Once you see the archonic control system, you have a responsibility to undermine it wherever possible. This does not mean violent revolution. Violence only generates more loosh. It means becoming ungovernable in your consciousness, refusing to participate in the fear-based narratives, disconnecting from the emotional manipulation of media and politics, cultivating genuine human connection and community outside institutional control, creating beauty, truth, and authentic expression that resonates at frequencies the Archons cannot tolerate. Every act of genuine love, not sentimental attachment, but the recognition of the divine spark in another, weakens the archonic grip. Every moment of authentic creativity, not entertainment designed by algorithms, but true expression of your unique consciousness, creates cracks in the prison walls. Every truth spoken in defiance of socially enforced lies is an act of spiritual warfare. The fifth principle is understanding that you are not alone in this fight. Throughout history, there have always been those who saw through the illusion. They were called different names in different eras: Gnostics, mystics, shamans, seers, heretics, witches, philosophers. Today they might be called truth seekers, whistleblowers, consciousness researchers, or simply awake human beings. You are part of an ancient lineage of those who refuse to be farmed. Find your tribe, share your knowledge, but be discerning. The Archons infiltrate every resistance movement, turning it into controlled opposition or leading it into dead ends. And finally, the sixth principle, the ultimate weapon against the Archons, is simply refusing to consent. Their entire system depends on your unconscious agreement. Every time you accept a limiting belief about yourself, you consent. Every time you participate in their emotional manipulation, you consent. Every time you believe you are powerless, separate, or insignificant, you consent. Withdraw your consent. Reclaim your sovereignty. Remember your true nature. The great secret that terrifies the Archons more than anything is this: they need you, but you do not need them. Without human consciousness to parasitize, they have no power. They are, in the words of the Gnostic texts, abortions, incomplete beings that exist only by stealing life force from those who possess genuine divine essence. The moment you truly understand this, the moment you fully embody your sovereignty, they lose all power over you. You become free. And a free human being is the most dangerous thing in the Archonic universe. The ancient technique to see Archons with your physical eyes is not just about vision. It is about awakening from a sleep so deep that most people do not even realize they're dreaming. It is about recognizing that reality is not what you have been told. It is about reclaiming the power that has always been yours, but was hidden from you by design. You now possess knowledge that empires have killed to suppress. The question is, what will you do with it?